Okay, so I think we're pretty much at steady state now. So Ronen and Hannah, if you would like to start with some more expanded introduction about Science Abroad, now is the time.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we can start just by introducing ourselves. I'm Hannah Noah Barad. I am now in my third year almost of my postdoc at Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems in Stuttgart in Germany. And I work on electrocatalytic materials for oxygen evolution reaction using combinatorial material synthetic routes and glancing angle deposition methods. And that's my scientific background. I did my master's at my undergrad, my master's and my PhD at Bar-Ilan University under the supervision of Professor Aryeh Tzaban. And I then worked with Professor David Kahan afterwards for about 1.5 years. And then I moved on to my postdoc. Ronen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Ronen Gottesman. I'm doing a postdoc in Germany in the Helmut Center for Materials and Energy in Berlin. I'm coming close to my fourth year. I'm doing combinatorial studies and new synthesis approaches of materials for solar fuel production, mainly focusing on metal oxide photoabsorbers and metal oxynitrides photoabsorbers for solar water splitting. I've done my bachelor degree in biophysics in Bar-Ilan, and then my master and PhD I've done in chemistry, and my PhD in chemistry actually I've done in the same group as Hannah Noah in photovoltaics, not photoelectrochemistry, during the big outbreak of the perovskite solar cells. So I was in the final wave of dye-sensitized solar cells, quantum dot sensitized solar cells, and then I was one of the first. I was basically the first generation of students that studied perovskite solar cells in Israel before the outbreak occurred. I think that's it.
Okay, so what we're planning to talk about is a little about how to do a postdoc and how Science Abroad can help people with that. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be a postdoc, it could also be a PhD overseas. But because we're both postdocs, we're focused on that. Please feel free to stop and ask questions in the middle, anytime in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask away. So we are both what's called branch managers and founders in Science Abroad. Ronen is in charge of the Berlin branch, and I'm in charge of the Baden-Württemberg Stuttgart branch. Basically, this means that we manage all the people who are registered for Science Abroad in the area of Berlin and Baden-Württemberg in Germany, because we're both in Germany, but there's branches all over the world. We have something like 14 branches spread out all over Europe, another 20-something branches spread in the United States, cross-country, and there's also now a new branch in Australia, actually. So for people who are interested, of course, we do this as volunteers, and whoever wants, if they're going somewhere new where there's no branch and they feel like there's enough Israelis who would like to join, who are in their scientific career paths, then of course they can volunteer and open a branch. We also founded last year what's called the Materials Scientists team, which includes scientists basically from all over different varieties and aspects of materials. So energy, nanomaterials, 2D materials, theoretical calculations of materials, anything related to materials. So Israel Vacuum Society is focused on material science, so kind of makes sense. And what we do actually in the branches and in the teams is we have different types of meetings. So it could be lectures or talks by professors who are interested in specifically in materials. Also it could be in the branches just some social event where we meet together and have a picnic or have a weekend together or something like that. So the point is also to be connected on a social level and also to be connected on an academic level and form this network of scientists. There's, of course, since Corona started, a vast online platform of seminars, webinars, chats, talks, meetings, events. There are a lot of different varieties that Science Abroad offers for scientists living abroad from Israel. And of course, Science Abroad also very much helps and assists with people coming back to Israel in all aspects, also from social and also from academic and a variety of things. Science Abroad is also really connected to all of the universities in Israel, and they quite often send out information about available positions and things like that for people who are interested in academia afterwards. But they also actually have courses or webinars and things like that now, or meetings that are focused on industry for people who would like to go back to industry. So what are our options after finishing our PhD? So first you need to get your PhD, of course, which is a whole process. But then you can either choose to go into the industry or you can choose to do a postdoc. From your postdoc, you can then choose, again, either back to industry or try and get an academic position, which is not very simple. In an academic position, there's actually a few options. So you can either choose to be a PI, which is a principal investigator. You have your own lab, you perform your own research, you get your own grants. It's a management position. Or you can be a research fellow, which usually is what's called Ozer Mechkar in Hebrew, or something similar. Several of the universities and institutions in Israel have this, not all of them do. And then you basically do your own research under a specific lab, under someone, but you're an independent researcher. Of course, in the industry, you have all the options. Some of them you saw already in the panel session. And of course, there's all the big defense industries in Israel, Rafael, Elbit. There's all the startups, small companies, large companies, and different varieties. Of course, again, the research fellow could be also a lab manager, a staff scientist, something like that. Or if you want to be a PI, then you're leading your own research group. So if you think about going on a postdoc position, there's actually some considerations you need to take into account, because usually you're not the only person going. So maybe you're married, maybe you have a partner, maybe you have children, maybe you have elderly parents who you're a little bit afraid to leave, or another family member who has some health issues that you're afraid to leave behind. So these are some of the considerations. Maybe your partner has a really good job and they can't leave. Professional, of course, considerations. What do you want to do with your future? What lab are you going to? What facilities do they have? Do they have money to support you or not? Do you need to get your scholarship? And of course, networking, which is a major part of postdoc. Geographical preferences, of course, locations. If you do your postdoc in the United States, it's of course much harder to travel back and forth to Israel if you want to visit frequently family and things like that. Language considerations, for example, Ronen and I are in Germany, so of course we need to learn German, especially if we have children and we need to communicate with the children's teachers, with the doctors and things like that. And of course, the research culture. So the European research culture is very different from the United States research culture. The US culture for research is very intense, highly competitive, long work hours. In Germany, for example, or in Europe in general, I wouldn't say we don't do as much research, we do, but it's a more relaxed and laid back version of research, and not so competitive where people are at each other's throats, but a lot more collaborations and assistance. And of course, there's the economical considerations, which are very important: cost of living, what scholarships you might have for going to the different countries, costs of relocation. You might have to relocate your whole family and several children and pets and things like that. You need a visa or working permit for your partner. Does your partner just want to take several years off from their life? So from their career life. So all of these are really, really important considerations that people need to take into account, because if you need to go on a postdoc, or if you want to go on a postdoc, then everything has to be considered. Otherwise, there's situations where, for example, I know of people who finished their postdocs early because their partners just couldn't handle it anymore. Or they went alone and they felt very lonely and they couldn't find any friends. So they left after 1 year and they didn't continue on and pursue what they wanted to. Or for example, during COVID now, a lot of people lost their postdoc positions because a lot of labs ran out of money and support because of all the COVID pandemic. So these are things that really need to be considered, of course, and what you do in these situations. Okay. So how to find a postdoc position, actually. First, of course, you have to ask yourself, do you think you want an academic position or do you think you want to go back into industry? This could help guide you into what type of postdoc position you want. You can do a postdoc if you want industry or if you want academia, but if you want academia, you have to do a postdoc. If you want industry, it's not really a requirement, but it could, of course, be very helpful for you and broaden your horizons and cultural research capabilities. So what kind of scientific questions or topics you might be interested in? That's things that you should ask yourself. You can get assistance from faculty members at your university or professional networks, previous collaborators, other people that you've spoken with at conferences. Even sometimes other students and colleagues can be helpful because maybe they know what you really like and they can help guide you with that. So talking to someone, faculty members at a university who you appreciate and you have a good connection with could be really helpful. Of course, another thing to do is search for interesting topics in your field, unanswered questions that either you might have or that you know exist out there in the field of research that you're interested in. And of course, get advice from your PI. Your PI might tell you, you know, I know you quite well and I know your research capabilities well. I think you do well in this field or in this area. So that's very helpful. Next thing to do is figure out where you're going to do a postdoc. So after you do some research, make a short list of potential labs or PIs that you would like to contact. This doesn't have to be too long, so don't contact 20 or 30 different people. Focus on 5 to 10 really interesting ones who you think you would really be interested in and go for those. But then submit your application properly so your chances for getting a postdoc position are increased. You can make a list based on their research, on their locations, pluses and minuses from all those aspects. You need to probably spend 2 to 4 years there for a successful postdoc. So take that into consideration as well. And then if you have, once you make this list and you have some sort of answer with regards to advantages and disadvantages for each of the PIs, then you should just grade them according to who you want the most and who you want the least, and start with the first 2 to 4. Those are the people you need to submit your file to or your proposal to in order to try and get a position. Next thing to do, of course, is to contact this PI at the potential lab. So start with preparing your academic CV. This is really important. Don't make it dry and boring, make it interesting. Okay, the whole point of sending in your CV is to get an interview. And dry and boring would be just lists of things, but you can also add into your CV things like what you did in your research or anything additional like volunteering and scientific activities that are not necessarily directly related to your research, but just to show that you have a broad horizon and you don't just only publish paper after paper without thinking about it.
No, can I
yes,
just add something? It's very important, section number 3, that you need to understand. If you want to do a postdoc abroad in a good lab, those professors are getting hundreds of emails per month. And also their group leaders and their postdocs are also getting emails, application emails. So you need to try to get your way in there and make it interesting. If you have some connection, it is very important that you use that connection, because many times I'm also getting, I'm a doctor, but I'm getting called professor like 3 times a month, getting application from China, from India, without even knowing my CV. They want to do research in perovskite solar cells. I haven't touched a perovskite solar cells for 4 years. Just, it's very important that you need to, the competition is high. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, very true. So as Ronen said, if you can make contact with a specific PI or lab that you're interested through someone that you know, faculty member at your university, this is really recommended because this means that the chances of your CV getting read are 10 times higher. Out of the 100 people and emails that this person gets on a daily basis, because your information was given through a specific route, someone that he already knows or she already knows, then they trust them more. And then the chances of your CV being read and you getting into this postdoc position are really very high and much better. And of course, you can just directly send an email to this lab that you're interested in with a short professional description of yourself and the CV. If you add some proposal ideas or questions and things that you want to research, so this means you need to do some background digging, of course, which you should have already done about the lab and what their capabilities are, and then put that proposal into words, maybe write a page-long proposal of ideas or things that you want to research and why you want to research them. That's a big plus, because then that shows that even if you don't have some contact through faculty member at your university, that shows the person who you're sending the CV to that you have already come up with ideas of your own, and they can look at them and say, oh, these ideas are actually also interesting for me, for my lab, and I would really like this person to come here and investigate them. So that's also a big plus and something you should consider when submitting for postdoc positions. Of course, very important is also to actually meet with the PI and visit the lab. Read about the members of the group, read about their research before your visit, before your interview. Usually the first interview is online before you go to see if there's really any basic chemistry as we might think of it. Without that, I mean, you don't bother going without having some sort of basic chat and basic interview on Zoom or something like that. Because then you don't even know what you're stepping into. Of course, then you visit the lab. Usually it's very common that you give a talk about your PhD research to the lab. You meet with other members of the lab. This could of course also be online. So we had several applicants for PhDs and postdocs during COVID, and we just did everything online with them. They asked us questions online. We asked them questions online, privately, of course, without the PI, so they could ask questions, you know, that are maybe bugging them more. Is this a good PI? Is the PI annoying? Is he a micromanager or she a micromanager? So all these details are quite important to understand and see what facilities the institute has. Is it impressive? Is it not impressive? When you get there, does it look like a hellhole with everything messed up around and nothing is accessible? Or does it look well organized and somewhere you can see yourself being, and a group that seems nice and people that seem inviting? Of course, everyone tries to be nice during these interviews, so it's a little bit hard to judge, but usually you'll see it immediately, because if they're organized and they really prepared a day for you to go visit and meet with people, then they're probably a more organized group that's more interested in actually gaining you as a postdoc over there or a PhD student over there, versus any other place that it's not organized and they forget and they this and they that. So these are things to take into consideration. Of course, during COVID right now, most likely things are online, but that's really not so bad. It's really doable. And actually, we had several people where we did like online tours for them. So someone walked around with their cell phone just to show them the institute, show them the facilities, so that they can get sort of a glance at what's going on, even though it's through a screen. So not directly, but at least halfway. Then there's the professional aspects of doing a postdoc. The main advantages are you basically become a completely independent researcher. Your PI is there as a colleague. He's not there as your advisor or supervisor. it's your work, it's your research, you work hard at it, and you become much more independent in your research capabilities and your research thought process, which is really important, of course, for developing your research skills. You learn a lot about different research cultures and different research ways. You view the academic world from a different light totally, because what you're used to right now is what goes on in Israel and what happens in Israel. It's very different everywhere around the world, the United States, in Europe, they're totally different from what happens in Israel. So that's another advantage, because you really broaden your capabilities and your horizons for research, which actually increases your creativity and your abilities. Of course, you go to a lab with new capabilities, new facilities, new techniques, things that you're going to learn, which of course is highly important for you as a researcher and for your CV in general, be it if you want to be in academia or if you want to continue in the industry, because you're actually gaining experience. You have new funding opportunities, and it's not only scholarships for you, but it could be now that you're a postdoc, you can actually write grant applications with the PI that you're working for as a postdoc. So that's really important for a career. Of course, you get opportunities to directly supervise students. I right now have a master's student who's working under me, and I've had several other students working under me throughout the time I was here. Ronen also has a bunch of master's students, PhD students who are working under him. So it's actually a really good opportunity to see, maybe if you want to continue in academia, are you happy and are you working well with supervision of students? Because it could be that some people it doesn't work for them and some people it works really well for them. So this is also like an opportunity to develop your management skills. Of course, you have the abilities to directly collaborate with other institutes and industry. This is a huge advantage of doing a postdoc. Most of the big and good labs abroad have a lot of collaborations. You get to go to different places, visit different people, of course now during Corona not, but you can still collaborate. I have several collaborators in Germany, in France, in the United States, and it's actually great opportunities for me because this also broadens my network and I get to know more people who can then maybe be helpful for me in the future. And of course, another advantage is learning how a foreign institute works. So everyone pretty much knows how things go on in Israel, how the institutes work, but it's really different abroad. It's really different in all of Europe and in all of the United States. Things are done differently and the behavior is completely different. So it's also a good way to learn different types of institutional backgrounds and pathways and things like that that could help you in the future. There's, of course, the disadvantages of doing a scholarship. You have a low salary or a scholarship. These, of course, are things that you need to take into consideration when you weigh out the balances. Maybe you have a spouse or a partner coming with you and they also work. So that's how your income is being kept up. But these are things to consider. Again, disadvantages is also the different research culture and ways. Even though it's an advantage, it's also a disadvantage because we come from Israeli institutes and the thought process there is completely different from other institutes. And sometimes that could also lead to clashes actually within people in the lab you're working in as a postdoc or as a PhD student overseas. So this is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And another main disadvantage is foreign bureaucracy and foreign institute. There's a lot more forms to fill out. There's a lot more different ways and different things that are accepted that you don't know about. And these are things that you have to learn. And sometimes it ends up in some sort of crashing or interactions or things that you do wrong. Of course, not your fault. You just don't know. But usually there's someone around to at least guide you and help you out to a certain aspect.
I have something to add.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Can you go back? Maybe I need to add it. I think Elad Gross mentioned it in the previous session. You have to understand that when you finish your PhD and you come to do a postdoc, your postdoc advisor is not your PhD advisor. So when you've done your PhD, you had a problem, you had an issue, you had a technical problem, something didn't work. You went to your advisor, you told him what's the problem, you went to the lab manager, and maybe you invested 20, 30% of your time to help them to fix that problem. Now, when you're a postdoc, that's your problem. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you are now expected to be fully independent. And of course, if you are pursuing to become either a research fellow or PI, you are also being judged on the way you do risk management, manage challenges, scientific challenges, technological challenges. Both Hananoa and myself, we actually developed here in our labs new infrastructures. It took me 2.5 years. Also, Hananoa, I think it took care at least 18 months. These are very complicated things. And of course, if you look at the disadvantages, you need to deal with people that they don't understand why do you want to do that. Even if your advisor gave you a full carte blanche to do whatever you want, you need to come mentally prepared to become independent and face many, many challenges. So as I said also before, and you will make mistakes. Don't let those mistakes define who you are and demotivate you. Just that's part of we are doing a PhD. I mean, when we finish our bachelor degree, we move forward. Then we did our master, it was hard, but then we did our PhD, and we look back at master students, and it just gets harder and harder, but still it's more fun. So this is why we do it. Just you need to know when you get a diploma and you go to a new place, you are no longer a PhD student. It's a change of mentality.
Yeah, that's very true. It's the change of mentality, and these are hard and difficult challenges, but in the end, if you succeed, you come out a better researcher and a better scientist on the other side. So that's, I guess, the general advantage of doing a postdoc. Okay, of course, there's the personal aspects of doing a postdoc. You're moving to a new country as an immigrant. You don't know the rules. You don't know the culture so well. You don't know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. You have to deal with foreign bureaucracy, with the visa, with registering in the city, with getting a phone line, with getting a cell phone, with opening a bank account. These are all highly complex and difficult things, especially if you're in a country that doesn't speak English. Uprooting a family is also something that's not very easy. So Ronen moved with his wife and his 2 children, and he had to find schools for them and take care of them. And his wife has to do things, and it's a very big challenge. And what do you do with your home in Israel? Do you rent it out? Do you sell it? Do you get rid of all your stuff? So this is also a very difficult process. You need to find an apartment in your new country, take care of new bills. This is not necessarily so straightforward. It could be that the institute you move to has a guest house that you can stay in the meantime until you settle all these things, but that's not always the case. Or it has some dorms that you can use to settle in the meantime, but it's also very difficult finding an apartment in a new country and understanding why you need certain things. So for example, in the United States, you need your credit line. In Israel, in Germany, you need what's called the SEPA, I think, I forgot, but you don't necessarily need it. You have to figure out a lot of, yeah, sorry. So you need to figure out a lot of different things, and it's not so straightforward. You can also be moving all alone. And that comes with a lot of difficult aspects. So I moved alone. My husband is in Israel because he's learning, he just finished actually, and he's now officially a doctor, but he was in medical school. So he had to stay for his career here. It's very difficult trying to find new friends, not feeling lonely, and not feeling helpless. So these are all aspects somewhat that you need to consider. Of course, remember, you're not alone because you have Science Abroad and you can connect with us and talk with us. And there's, as you can see, so many different platforms. There's Facebook, there's a YouTube channel, there's a Twitter, there's a LinkedIn. Science Abroad helps with all the professional social support aspects from leaving for your postdoc or PhD until you return. There's also an alumni network that you can join and speak with people there, and they have activities and meetings and lectures. So you're not alone, and Science Abroad is there. And please feel free to use any of these links. Maybe actually we can put them in the chat or something, or send them out if people are interested. And if you have any questions in the last few minutes that are remaining, please feel free. We're both here to answer them.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. A lot of information that is not trivial in my opinion, and the floor is now open for questions.
Kalanoa, a tongue-in-cheek question for you. After
Yeah.
you got used to the Israeli bureaucracy, you found the other bureaucracies were difficult?
Oh, German bureaucracy is 10 times more difficult.
Yeah.
10 times
Wow.
more difficult. I think they burn down through full rainforests with the amounts of papers that you have to fill out here.
Okay.
Any questions from the audience? If not, I would like to start with a question directed more for Ronen, I guess, about how it was to move with 2 kids to a non-English speaking country. What would be the main challenges, you would say? How long did it take you in advance to prepare for the whole move and everything?
Well, I think the main challenge looking backwards was how my wife and I felt, because we felt really, really anxious and afraid what will happen. Are we doing something that will affect the kids negatively? Kids are very resilient. So my son started his first grade here in Berlin. And then after a few months, the same issues we have with kids here in Germany are the same issues, more or less the same issues that parents have in Israel. There are some mismatches between the German education system and the Israeli education system. I don't want to go into that because it will never end. The transition was quite, I mean, I've done it really quick, but I didn't sleep. I was online any second I had to find an apartment, and I knew where I'm going to work. I knew where are the Jewish schools or the Jewish kindergarten, because I did want my kids to learn Hebrew, speak in Hebrew, and learn how to read and write. So my son, when I came here, my son was 6, my daughter was 2. So it was a difficult period to find an apartment, and also I needed now to register the kids. In Germany, not as in Israel, so there is a waiting list, and you can wait for 6 months, and there's also a trial period, so your kid go into that school, and if he doesn't cope well, they just kick him out. Of course, I'm talking about Berlin. We have 16 federal states here in Germany, but Germans are very cold. So you cannot really force yourself as an Israeli on them. They don't care. We know that that's a mentality which is very cold. But as I said, we felt more bad than our kids. And I'm just that's a retrospective. I mean, now I can see it. They know so much now. Then I see their cousins in Israel, completely different development chart. They speak 3 languages. They've seen Europe. They know that I'm working in a place that is not close to what I've done in Israel. So overall, it's a positive experience for them.
That's very relieving to hear. Thank you. We have let's say 2 minutes for extra questions. So if anyone from the audience wants, this is now the all right. If not, I do have another question. You mentioned before, this is relevant for both of you, the fact that postdoctoral research is much more independent. But you did mention the possibility of a micromanaging PI. My question is, how exactly do you cope with both ends of this spectrum?
I mean, we have that our PI is micromanaging.
No. You mentioned in the presentation that there is a possibility of getting a micromanaging PI.
Okay.
I'd say it's hard for both of us to comment on it because both our PIs are not micromanaging. But I think in the case of a micromanaging PI, your best bet is to just gain their trust. And in that way, they can see that they really can leave you alone as an independent researcher, and they don't have to hear back from you every week or every day or whatever, and see where you're at. If you really show capabilities, and maybe if you realize this is a micromanaging PI, then you can initially be the one who says, okay, let me now come to him with results, let me come with data, let me show him or her what my capabilities are. And then once they see that and they gain your trust, then they'll probably leave you alone.
Okay, that's a great answer. We kind of have to wrap it up. I have one final question that was passed on to me by the other organizing members of the committee. Is it possible for you to share the presentation you made with us? Because we're kind of upset that you could not be here present in the talk itself.
Oh, I don't know. Is there one in? I think we can share it. Yeah.
The entire presentation or just the links? I don't have any issue with that.
The entire presentation, if it's possible for you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sending that's fine. No problem.
No problem.
All right, great. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I personally really liked it, and it's really relevant to the future of many of the people here in this conference. So you are free to go on with your days and your research. And the rest of us, we will reconvene in 10 minutes for the next session. Thank you and bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.